Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I begin with a little confession. When I first began to prepare my remarks for this morning, I intended to focus on the role of patents in promoting economic growth. The more I studied WIPO data and other sources, the more I came to the conclusion that patent numbers, whether in terms of filing or grants, are a pretty poor indicator of the level of innovation in a country. And if I must say, sir, in answer to the questions you posed, they're far too difficult to answer in 10 minutes, so I'm not even going to try. Many commentators have taken the view that the patent system throughout the world is in crisis. And there are many reasons for this. Far too many patents are granted for very trivial, innovative steps, if they're innovative at all. They're tiny sideways steps, sometimes backward steps. When I started in 1965, in order to get a patent, you had to have an invention that was new, unobvious, and useful. And now, we see, many thousands of patents granted annually for inventions that are of very dubious merit. And this tends, not only does it not encourage economic growth, it tends to retard economic growth. Think of small and medium-sized enterprises, for example, when they're confronted with many thousands of patents that are far too expensive for them to properly evaluate, covering very trivial or insignificant steps. Now, we are suffering from a shortage of time, so I'm going to zip through my slides a little faster than I had originally intended. But I do want to make this point, that it's really up to the government, to a large extent, to encourage innovation. And they do that in many countries in different ways, such as through research and development tax incentives. The trouble is that if a government spends money in encouraging research and development, it tends to be invisible to the ordinary member of the public, whereas building roads and doing other things that are much more concrete in nature are easier and better from the short-term political point of view. At the same time, if a country is to continue to grow economically and to prosper in the future, it is absolutely crucial that governments make a significant investment. I think a rough rule of thumb is for governments to devote up to about 2% of their gross domestic product to encouraging research and development. And that money is significant, but it has to be spent wisely. We had occasion some years ago to look at the field of diaper patents, and we found over 10,000 patents covering disposable diapers. Well, what are you supposed to do if you want to get into that business? It's very, very difficult. Now, India has come out for criticism by the United States Chamber of Commerce for not adequately protecting IP rights. And the International Trade Commission is conducting a survey right now of US firms to understand how the policies of India discriminate against US exports and investment. And if you're feeling badly when you hear that, Canada is also on the watch list, although we are the United States' greatest trading partner and are obviously in close proximity to the United States. I find these comments to be very ironic because the United States has a history of discriminating against foreigners when it comes to protecting their own citizens. In fact, Professor Jane Ginsburg, who is a prominent teacher and writer, called the United States in the 19th century a pirate nation. And the reason why she said that is that the United States refused to grant copyright to works of foreign authors. and that didn't change until 1891. And the reason for that was that Americans like to read British authors in preference to the works of American authors. And so the solution was, let's not give copyright to British authors. And when they finally grudgingly granted copyright protection, it was on the condition that the books of foreign authors had to be manufactured in the United States. And that manufacturing clause was not repealed until fairly recently, and that was done only because the United States by then realized that the United States had become a big net exporter of books by authors. So we have to take with a grain of salt the comments we get about IP policies in every country. All that said, it's very important to take a realistic view at what is really going on. In the slides that I'd like to share with you today, and I realize that especially some of you at the back can't see the slides very well, so I would commend to you the following. First of all, you can write me. My email address is on our website, and I can send you a copy of the slides that I'm presenting this morning. You can also look at the WIPO.int website, which is really a wonderful source of statistical data on a country-by-country basis. You can also easily find the GDP statistics for various countries, as I have done with this first slide showing China and their very impressive growth, rising very steadily in the past 8 years to the point where it's now over $9 trillion, a very impressive number. And take a look at the patent applications. Now, in this slide, the gray bars represent the number of applications filed by domestic Chinese inventors. The orange bars represent the number of applications filed by foreign companies. And the green bars, you can barely make out the green, but they're the ones at the very bottom. They show the number of foreign patent applications filed worldwide by applicants of China residency. So you see that as impressive as the growth in the GDP was, the growth in filing is incredible. It's going up exponentially and shows at the moment no signs of abating. Well, you know, when you practice law as long as I have, over 50 years now, you know that when something looks too good to be true, it usually isn't. And so before I comment further on that last remark, let's just take a look at the patent grants, and you'll see that they're also pretty impressive. In 2012, the last figures that I had when I compiled these charts, WIPO showed that Chinese nationals were responsible for almost 150,000 granted Chinese patents, and the number of issued patents to foreigners was also pretty impressive, roughly 75,000. Now, the problem with China is that there's no way of knowing, or at least there's no way I could find out, what the mix is between patents of invention and utility models. My feeling is that given the enormous disparity between the number of applications that are filed by Chinese people in China compared to the number of applications that are filed by them abroad, that most of the inventions that are the subject of the applications are for utility models, or if not, for patents of very dubious economic value. My feeling is that these huge numbers are due to government policy in dictating to Chinese companies that they have to file a lot of patent applications, regardless for what. Because it's easy for the government to say, look at how impressive our filing statistics are. You have to dig deeper to try to find out what the value is of the innovations that are represented by these patents. And my feeling is that since such a small number, it's roughly 4% of all applications filed by Chinese in China were filed abroad. That is an indication that the vast majority of these huge Chinese filings are not of any great economic importance. So let's take a look at India. India's GDP is pretty impressive, over $1.3 trillion. And I have seen reports that indicate that economists predict that in 15 years, it's hard to believe, but they say that in 15 years, the Indian economy is expected to rival that of the United States. That would be an incredible achievement if it comes to be. Of course, India has a population of over 1.2 billion. The United States is maybe a quarter of that. So you can't actually compare them too easily. Patent applications